we'll introduce it. So we have the language. So we're live. This is the conference committee on the FY26 budget 493. And we're continuing our work. And we do have some language on the skilled nursing. We could do that first, or we could do that later.
Let's see.
This is the 500,000.
It's simple and we're.
This is the language about what report we would be asking for.
Okay. Happy to have you look at it back later or now, whatever.
Are we doing language tomorrow?
We're mostly doing language tomorrow.
Yeah, so you can just, you don't have to
Okay.
comprehend it
So
on that,
this is,
but you could,
this is the 500,000 for
Yep.
yeah,
nursing incentives.
and let us know. You could, there's other data points you want to be in there.
Okay,
We're open to that.
great. Thank you for having that already. That's great.
They did that in between the T-bill conference.
Yes, I know, we've all been, okay. Oh, so we have something to propose. Jim, do you want to, the one thing we forgot to just chat about later was, we talked about it earlier this morning, I think, but we now have some language on the pension. Do you want to
Sure.
see?
Sorry. We outlined a proposal this morning
Yeah,
to reduce the amount going to be picked for compensation and changing the two positions to exempt, but put them under the normal human resources approval process once they've done their work. So this language we understand is the standard process for exempt employees. And I think it goes through HR and then has to be signed off by the agency of administration. Separately from this, in the E section, there would be, if we accept this, there would be language changing those two positions to exempt. And that was 125,000.
The other page is
Instead
a
of the
different
250,
language.
we cut it in half. That includes if they make any adjustment, pay and benefits.
okay, we'll have to still consider that because I want to hear more about what it, just get more information on what it means to switch it to exempt and what that kind of, what the implications are that of doing that, and if it has any other issues that I know. Want to check with folks.
Yeah.
For the administration.
Is there somebody to,
I'll talk to,
I would talk to HR.
yeah, I'll talk to HR and talk to the administration about what it would mean. If like there's other, well, just if there's like, if you do this for them, does it cause an impact over
Well,
other?
part of the problem with the classified is, as I understand it, when you do this market rate, which they've done before, it also impacts everybody else that might have a similar.
With that title.
if they're classified?
Right. So
They're exempt.
it could impact, other staff in that agency that are similar. And if you remember in the budget, there were some pretty big numbers because of a reclassification that started
Yeah.
with law enforcement.
Yeah,
In one department, then all of a sudden you had the police, the fish and wildlife, the lottery. There are definite advantages, I think,
Okay.
what little I know, to go this route and be targeted towards the industry that you're dealing with. So,
okay. Just before I agree, I want to hear the other
Sure.
side real quick.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's language. And then do you want to just, we had this language on the back
I'm
too.
sorry.
This was language that was,
Trevor got.
right, Rep Squirrel got, and it was from the Budget Adjustment Act, right? That there was the 490. And this clarifies, no, it's total for 490.
Oh, sorry, yes.
It's money that already existed. This is not new money. It's just explaining how it's supposed to go. And I think that this was in the budget adjustment.
I would have to double check on if it's sitting in the FY 25 or FY 26 budget, but it's 490,000 total that's unallocated currently.
Right.
So this specify the use of that 490,000.
But it's not new money.
It's not any new money. And this is, a justice reinvestment too. I think we tried to do this in the budget adjustment and it didn't happen. Not because the budget adjustment didn't happen. not-
Right. And this would be a new section, this 33.8.1. We're not supplanting anything that there.
It would be different from what was E338.
Because right now it just says the total without how it gets broken out.
So the House had a E338.1, the Senate deleted it. This would not be replacing the House E338.1. It would just happen to fall in the same section.
No, okay. Fine, but this reminds me of, which I think I brought to your attention, Representative Shy, about Mentor Vermont. We had put
Oh, yes.
mentoring, but we didn't say
Yeah.
we wanted to go to
Venture
mentor.
Vermont, right.
So we're gonna have language on that. Well, we do have language on that.
That will just be, and
In the-
you'll see it.
You looked like it was ready to hand out.
This is something else.
Okay. We're
Um,
mostly not doing language right now, but somehow we're doing language.
Right, yeah. Once you get on language.
I know, it's hard to stop. So, did you want to talk about the proposal we gave you this morning?
Yeah,
BBC.
We'll do that too.
Okay.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Okay.
yes, I guess the short and responses, we agree with it, basically.
Okay,
I think there wasn't anything in here that we wanted to change,
okay,
based on other discussions, we thought this was a reasonable approach.
okay. Great. Thank you very much. So we went over that this morning. So childcare, food, and serve, learn, and earn in conservation districts. Great. And JFO, do you guys have a copy of this?
I don't know if we do, but we can get it after.
Okay,
Ignore the random parentheses.
parentheses.
No, she didn't.
We'll never volunteer to help me out.
You were working.
Oh, and then we also, just, there's one more language thing, but you gave us the legislative intent for childcare funding, and we'll agree to the language that you had. It was
Oh, yes.
18.1. It feels superfluous, but if that's what we need to do, that's fine. Happy to do it. So we have a bunch of other things to talk to you about, and then we have the budget box thingy to talk about.
Okay.
What would you like us to, where would you like us to start?
I think it'd be good to talk about the budget box,
Okay,
if you want to do that.
yeah. So do you want to talk about the top one? The House position on the tax credits was,
Yeah, so, overall, just for those listening, we were trying to say, where are we trying to get to? So trying to get to a balanced budget. We had a box, asked JFO to, yes, come up with what the pressures are that are costs. So the House has is it a miscellaneous tax bill, or is there some, I don't know what bill it's in.
there's,
Tax credits.
it's a tax,
51.
it was your child
Senate
care
bill.
tax
Oh, right.
credit bill that came over.
So that's where all the tax credits are. It's 3.5 million more than the Senate. We've set 10 million aside for tax credits,
Right.
but this would be the full range. I think it's good to keep that full 13.5 million available for the Senate Finance Committee as they look at those tax credits.
Yeah.
So we need to find that. That's 3.5 million more than the Senate position I need to find.
So basically you're agreeing with the House position of 13.5 million, however
No.
that's falling out, but that we should reserve that.
We're saying, yeah, the money is there, but
Okay.
like if for some reason finance decides not to do that,
Right.
they might only do 13.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
but we should.
This gives them the opportunity to go to agree with the House.
Okay.
position. So we didn't put money in for the unfortunate excess time that the legislature will be here at $300,000 a week. This is for 5 weeks would be $1.5 million. We're not saying it's going to be 5 weeks to Senator Westman's point,
Right,
but there's $1.5 million could be the veto session. It could be some days in the fall. We just don't know what's going to happen. So this reserves a full 1.5 million to cover those costs. not knowing exactly where they're gonna end up, but we're sure it's gonna be at least 2 weeks. It could be 2.5 weeks.
Could be 3, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we just don't know. So this keeps the money there. We had agreed to the House increase to the Sustainable Jobs Fund, and we didn't have that. This is all based on the Senate construct of being
Right.
the last bill to pass. So we had to find that 30,000, rounded up from the 25. We had interest to work on some additional primary care funds of $520,000. And then those equal $5.5 million.
Right.
So we had a correction about the telephone tax that we didn't have 2.5 million that we are collecting. When we postponed the other thing, we forgot to continue that we'd be collecting that 2.5, so that helps us a little bit. We saved some money on the DOC facility conversion, $50,000. We lowered the urban search and rescue. We lowered ideal, so that got us to 2.8 million or so that we needed remaining to cut.
Well, I'm not sure that we actually had the whole telephone tax because I've got one that says 5.36. So I
Yeah.
think that's probably where we want to think about is the 5.36.
Okay, yeah, so the telephone tax we think is around 2.5 million, but maybe that
I
was,
think
that
it's
was,
not, yeah,
okay.
premature, I think.
okay, so that's,
So we're really looking at the 5.36.
okay. Yeah, so we were trying to find that was kind of our goal. What other thing, because we were going back and forth on, should we cut this, should we cut that, without knowing where we were trying to get to. So this gave us a number to get.
Right. So I think for purposes of our conversation, it sounds like you're agreeing with the House position for the dollar figure of the tax credits,
Yeah,
right? And we should figure out what we want to do in the legislative budget. We already did the Sustainable Jobs Fund, and then the additional primary care, we've had some sort of offline conversations about the primary care, the new residencies and rural primary care residencies. That seems to be a workforce issue as well as a healthcare issue. So
right. Senator Lyons isn't here, but I know it's something that she has been advocating for.
Right.
Trying to find a way to fit it in.
yeah, so this is a way to fit it in. So maybe we agree to the items on here.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So, do you want me to go through the base and one-time things that we're thinking about?
Yeah. You're gonna use this,
I'm using
Ladies.
I'm using the one that I made all the notes on.
this one.
Yeah, that's the first, so that is the base one, right?
No, this is, this can,
Oh, I'm using.
this is, like, this is base and other, but not,
Yeah.
but not.
Not one time. Okay, so, you were thinking about the VPIC and that affects a whole bunch of areas, so we won't talk about those right now. We agreed, proposed removing the State Labor Relations Board 2 positions. Agreed cutting court diversion down to 150, which you had proposed. Oh, and then we would agree to the Attorney General. We have the home repair fraud we'd already agreed to, and then funding the Solicitor General position in the Attorney General's office. It was one of the ones I mentioned. It was, I'm sorry. You can think about that. And we did talk to folks about that. We talked about Vermont court diversion going to 150. The Defender General, we would agree to keeping the assigned counsel contract increase in the base, but move the training funds to one time.
Okay,
Agree to removing the warehouse within food bank warehouse within Vermont Emergency Management. We already talked about the military and leaving the 100,000 out and putting that in budget adjustment. And we just talked about doing a 5% increase for infants and toddlers. That was on the other sheet already. That was on there.
So this line 20, yeah.
That's line 20, so we do 5% instead. Still waiting, S-126, I guess, just got voted out, but we haven't all had a chance to look at that, so we should talk about that at a different time. And I think we're gonna do something different with the ed finance. I think it's gonna go into one time, some construct that to be, we'll know that by tomorrow.
The full form, and that was something that isn't on the, was something that we were talking on our side, because we only had 1 million, and if it's gonna be 4 million.
Right.
We have to find that money.
Right, so I think we may have a construct to figure out, to look at tomorrow.
Okay,
And we agreed to the land use review board that funds the second half of FY 26. And had you assumed to keep them limited service or to convert to permanent classified for the land use review board?
I think the request is to move, we were gonna try to move them to.
Permanent classified? Yeah, that is what I had heard also. Getting some more positions. I want to hold on, we should talk about the positions. The B802 on line 30 is a position that we want to talk how we got the position. Moving further down to section D. We're dealing with the cash fund separately. We agreed to the PCBs. Proposed to not do the transfer for the Farm Security Special Fund. And we already agreed about the Child Care Contribution Special Fund. I think that's everything on this, the B section. Do you want me to, should we talk about positions before one time or one time in the positions or what do you?
Either way, do you have the position?
I have the positions here. We got a position. Sorry. Some updated ones. Here's some more.
Not bad, still,
You want
yeah, I don't have my copy.
this and
The new position check.
so we at this point we're keeping the position in the treasurer's office. And then removing the two labor relations board, we just talked about that already.
And we, just trying to remember, and maybe it's on here and I'm just not seeing, but when we agreed on the Defender General, which I think we did in the BA, we also did this for the state's attorneys, the limited service that we moved to permanent.
That was in the BAA.
Hmm?
Well, we both.
We all agreed, so it's not in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me go back to 131.
The treasurer, yeah.
I didn't move to a position.
No, you did not. I don't think we're going to get unanimity on that position. But I would like to propose that we keep that position. And I understand that we would like to not have that position. The state's attorney position, B205, we decided to remove that because they have a bunch of vacancies and they can reclassify a position there. The transport deputies, we agreed to 1. You proposed that earlier today, B207. The Secretary of State, make that a limited service position. And then there's positions related to S-126, so we haven't talked about those. And then at the bottom, 802, 802, and B1100 for the positions for housing and community development. What we'd like to propose is just, let's give the department 3 positions, two at 150 each in one time, and 1 because it's already in base. Just the amount, but let them decide how they want to deploy those 3 positions. In that department, they've got VHIP, they've got the manufactured homes, they've got this Homes for All thing, and rather than us telling them where to put them, just say, here's the 3 positions, you figure out how you want to use them.
Yeah, that sounds good. And we are going to keep B713, even though there's not a new position. We are converting those positions in the LURB.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, because all the other ones are already that way, and these were the 2 that weren't.
Can't remember. I just remembered we wanted to do it.
That's right. Yeah. So that was the other part of it was the 150 for the second half of the year. And then then it was the converting them to permanent.
Okay.
So I don't know what we end up with positions, but that's the position piece.
Well, yeah, I think that brings the Senate position to the House position or even maybe even below. So
Okay.
we're close to
The
the
government.
governor's position on as via the new positions.
Yeah. Okay. And then we'll see about S-126.
Yeah. And that would be good for center lines to be.
Yes. So we'll do that tomorrow morning. Yeah. Okay, 1 times?
Okay.
Yeah.
You want a new one or you got?
All my notes are on the old one for me.
I'll take it. One to volume 2.
You want a new
Yeah,
one? or you
I'll
want-
take them.
I took yours.
I'll take a new one
I
too,
kept
but
one for one.
Yeah.
I think we're good, thank you.
Yeah, I'll get that.
I'm using my old one and then you can say if we. Okay, so on 1 times, we already agreed to number 2, is that already on the top? Yes, okay. Line 9, the Department of Public Safety, I think we had proposed 100,000 for that. For the
Yeah.
community radio stations, okay. Not touching lines 12, 13, and 14, because that's S-126. The whole fire apparatus thing is part of the cash fund, and we'll get that information later. Line 17 is serve, learn, and earn, and so we just agreed to doing it for 250.
Okay.
Okay. Line 23. I understand that there's a willingness to go to 250 on that. The question is where the money should come from. And because of the tobacco fund, and we lose out on leveraging money for federal dollars if we use the tobacco fund. So I don't know where else we can find the 250.
Oh, well, I'm thinking that the additional substance use prevention money that is going to be 2013 might be, I just asked.
I think that was spent, but I need to just, in the,
Spent all year.
in the 3 lines above that, you've got
Maybe you spent it all.
3, 8, and 2, that's 1.3, and that's what was additional.
Okay, all right.
So,
Hopefully try to find some room for that on the bottom line.
right. Right. Prefer not to use the tobacco fund,
Okay, we can agree.
but do okay.
250 general fund.
And we could propose some language on
because we want to see some accountability on what are the results
Yeah.
of doing this.
Well,
And 250 might not get to all the centers, so maybe it's a
No,
pilot
it would
project.
probably
Right.
get to half and probably be a pilot. I'm happy, I'd be happy to see some results in this area,
Yeah.
period. This isn't, Senator Kitchell, and I worked on language. For the last 8 years, we've done stuff at least 4 times.
Uh-huh.
And, we're still tied with Mississippi for cleaning moments.
So is there language you can put in around getting this money for results?
We can
Can you work
talk-
on some language
we
about
can
that?
Talk with, joint fiscal, talk with Brady and see if we can come
Okay.
up with some.
That would be great.
I would like to see the health department, produce some statistics that, improved on this too.
Yeah.
Sorry. This is a long history.
I hear that. Okay. Let's see, we already talked about the local food shelves, the community resource center, the child care apprentice program. We're dealing with the agency. You all just agreed to that
Right.
stuff, so yes,
Well, that was in your sheet.
right. And agency of ed, we're dealing with separately. Line 31, we also agreed to.
On the agency of ed, don't we have to put in the 4 million though? Because it's
The-
negative. and-
Yeah, so there's yes, I think we're gonna have a proposal for how to handle
Okay.
how that works.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're right, we got to account for the full.
We will account for the full 4 million, right? So that brings us to the Lake Champlain International Fishing Derby. So, so what we learned is that, the Department of Tourism, right, we heard this, had rearranged their budget to increase money for the GROW grants, but it showed up as new, and it wasn't clear to any of us, I believe, when they came and testified, that it was really actually still part of their base budget. So it showed up as new. We said we don't need a new program. We cut it. I think it just has sort of come to light that they actually took a cut in their base budget. And our House Commerce Committee had conversations with them and talked with us. And so the proposal, and it was 350,000. So our proposal is to give them 320 and use the other 30,000 for the fishing derby.
Which has merit as being a tourism. related.
Right, exactly. Right. It'll still stay with Fish and Wildlife, because we also learned that you get your logo and there's promoting fishing at the fishing derby with Fish and Wildlife. So there's some logic to that. So that's the proposal of those two things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Great. And then we're dealing with the cash fund later and,
So we'll put the third in here, but then on that
right,
base sheet, we'll put it to 320.
right, 320 on for the tourism for the programs, right? And then down below, let's see, sounds like we agreed to make the bond bank 7.5 million, but put the additional 1.6 in VHFA.
Yeah,
So that changes line 42. And then 43 and 44 get combined, right? So that 1.6 gets added to your 14,000,005.
Yeah, that
Right.
becomes 16.1.
Right. Math and public.
Obviously got someone else's.
Somebody
sheet.
else's. And then VHIP funding is fine. The position is part of those position things. So the 3 positions, the VHIP itself, program money stays the way it does.
and when you say at the 4.3. Or are you counting?
No, the VHIP program is 4,150,000. We had taken, the House took that
Okay.
position out. You put it back in, and we're saying,
Right.
we're giving them the 3 positions. So
The 100
VHIP itself still stays at 4.15. And then they'll figure out how they want to do their positions. Okay. So then I'm turning the page over. The small business technical exchange, proposed 240,000. So that's 20,000 for RDC, and we eliminate the funding for the Irish Trade Commission.
What was that first one? 240?
240.
Okay.
0 on the Irish Trade Commission. Line 55, I know there are two of us on our side that agree with that and one that probably doesn't agree with that.
Correct.
Okay. So we're proposing to keep that in,
Okay, the 700,000.
right?
Thank you.
We've already talked about NOFA. We talked about farm to school. We talked about conservation districts. That was all on our proposal that we handed you earlier. We can agree to the nursing home staff incentives, and we asked for language and you have it. So we'll look at that, the language with the money. It's there. And then keep the support for local civic journalism.
Thank you.
Not do line 74 and 75, which are related to S119 or H472. The House hasn't even seen this. We've taken no testimony. None of the committees that are involved know anything about it. And that sounds like something that can continue in the next session of the biennium. So it'd be premature to put it in here.
We can agree to that.
Okay. We already had agreed to the doula.
Yep.
And then we're skipping the Green Mountain Care Board because that's 126. And then the Office of the Defender General. Yes, on the server capacity, the Orleans staff office goes to 50,000 because that's what they need. That's been vetted and agreed to by all the people on both sides that are with that. The 20,000 to Addison County for their new office since they were kicked out. And then the digital infrastructure, and it's got to be called something else. It's not to support RPC applications. It needs a different descriptor.
Right.
Land use review board, so that was part of the technical letter earlier today.
Right. So we're not going to put RPCs in there. Okay.
I'm
And
sorry,
then
what you do with the general IT?
We kept that in.
Kept it at 30. No, we need a new descriptor as far as the sheet, but, and we have new language, but that's still at the 100,000.
Right. I think that's part of Act 181 from last year.
Right. Yes, it is to continue that.
Yeah.
For the mappings of the different
Right.
tiers
Um,
and the capital investments will
we have to,
wait.
what they're doing in the, yeah, exactly. So I think that's everything. I don't know, JFO, did we miss anything that we thought we were talking about or on these pages?
I have two just AFO language recommends. We could go
Okay,
through those quickly.
anything to help you guys out?
So this first document, this would be a new section E312.8. This would be a repeal of the section in 2022 Action Resolves 185, the FY23 big bill. This section E240.6 amends the substance misuse funding statute and is set to take effect on the same day that the section in the budget repealing the substance misuse funding statute would take effect in this bill. So this section would need to be repealed so that it doesn't supersede what the repealed budget.
Okay,
And
so at the end of the day, what does that mean happens?
That the language repealing the substance misuse funding statute in the budget still takes place, and then the substance misuse special fund that's created in the bill
Yeah,
takes place rather than
okay.
this language. That
So
was
it's sort of
amended
the transition to the right name of the correct of the fund.
Right, and
Okay.
this could have just caused a technical trip up issue if
Okay.
this section.
Okay. That sounds all right.
312.8 is a new section.
Okay.
And then this is just two bits of language that would be added to the reversions and fund transfers section. So you'll see on page 3, just for some context, there are two bills that are currently have in the language a section amending a prior year appropriation and directing it to the Environmental Contingency Fund. The appropriation has been spent out of, and you can't appropriate to a fund, so there will be an amendment proposed in a couple of bills relating to that. But in order to allow for the language in those bills to make sense, there just needs to be language added to the big bill that says that any unencumbered balance in that appropriation will revert at the end of fiscal year 2025, and then say that in D101 on page 2, any funds that result from that reversion shall be transferred to the Environmental Contingency Fund. So it's just reverting that prior year appropriation and then transferring it to the Environmental Contingency Fund.
Right, a two-step process to have it end up in the same place.
Right.
And I think that it will get, reappropriated for the same purpose,
Right.
just from the Environmental Contingency Fund as opposed to the general.
So the replacement on page 3, the governor had 3 million in brownfields and base, and we agreed to 1 million more.
And
I
this
don't know what this 2 million means.
this is entirely separate. This wouldn't be in the big bill. This would just be language for those other bills that we're trying to amend the prior year appropriation. So the big bill language would sit those funds in the Environmental Contingency Fund so that they would be available if the language in the other bill
So
happens.
this isn't changing the amounts we agreed to in the big bill.
No.
Okay, no.
And that reminds me about the language about that the brownfield, I think I got information that we needed to make it clear that the funds could be used for both evaluation and remediation. Did I talk to you about that?
I don't recall. I can talk to you offline about it.
So we might need some clarity that it could be used for both, doesn't have to, because somebody was concerned the way it was worded, it only could be used for remediation, but you have to do the evaluation before you can do the remediation.
We can update the one-time language so that it allows for that.
Okay. Seems all right.
Yeah.
I don't know. You guys okay with this?
So, I mean, and it's related to 127. This last.
Not all of it, the last
No,
part.
yeah, just the last page.
Yeah, I guess I'm still confused about page 3 and why we're,
Page 3 was just to provide the committee of conference with context for why these sections would be added to the bill.
okay.
And what they're related to the bills that you have at the top.
Yes, so there's language in those two bills that would be amending a prior year appropriation to have it be appropriating to a fund, which can't occur, and the appropriation it's been spent out of by the Agency of Natural Resources. So the language in those bills, there will be proposed amendments to make that language work, but then to make sure that there are actually funds available in the Environmental Contingency Fund. A reversion and a transfer have to occur in the big bill.
I trust you, Grady.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, I know.
We can talk more about it.
We can get lessons later.
Also, just one other point, S.397, or is it H.493, the flood omnibus bill, some people call it, has some language about creation of the voluntary buyout program that is different than what we have in the budget. So I think the best thing to do would be to strike it from the budget.
And make sure 397 passed.
Right,
Yeah.
that's the only catch.
Yeah, I understand.
So we need to talk to Tucker about that and how what's the best way to
Yeah.
evade an issue.
However, they all think it works best.
Right, because you could also say that if that passes, it supersedes the budget,
Right.
then,
It makes it messy though.
right, administratively, yeah, okay,
I got two more things, I just
Okay.
realized. One is that, as we learned about the, I don't know if I already said this or not, the Attorney General fees. So the governor's proposed budget assumed increases in fees, but the fees never got into the budget, into their budget. So it's kind of a back end way of getting them what they need for their
So we
budget.
didn't
So,
include the fees, but you did.
right,
right,
so,
because they were,
because they needed it to do the budget that the governor said was fine. So I think we have to agree to the Attorney General fees.
okay,
And then the other thing was the Vermont Small Business Development Center, which is housed at the Vermont State University, actually in Randolph at VTC is where they've been housed for years. And they have been able to, for many years, it hasn't cost them $300,000. Do you want to explain this?
The ability to, for the space that the state colleges provide becomes an in-kind contribution, which is helpful leverage the federal funds that they receive. And the federal funds have been decreasing. Anyhow, we're 150 short. So we had several suggestions to close that gap.
So the recommendation proposal is to reduce the freedom and unity grants by $50,000. That's at the Vermont State Colleges. So that's 50,000. To reduce the tech hub by UVM by $50,000. And then we would just have to get 50,000. Is this one time or is this going into?
I think it was.
well,
One time,
doesn't sound like something we can agree to right now.
right.
So
We
we
just got this figured out. We just found out about it from the SBDC and our House Commerce Committee.
But it also seems like if running the risk of backfilling federal funds.
It's not I'm not sure whether that's,
We phone a friend.
Well, we can
talk about it. We
Talk about
proposed it and we'll
that.
talk about it further.
Okay.
But that was, there's things that come to our attention at the end.
Yeah, that's, I'm thinking too.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that's everything that we had.
It's 150 or.
Well, right, 150, and then we had a proposal to cover 100 of it from reducing other things that are currently in budget. That was agreed to by the committees involved on our side.
Okay,
And we had been the ones to propose it in the first place, so
okay,
it's just that last 50. So anyway, to think about.
Okay. Where are we on the paper?
That is in here. I don't know if they agreed or not, but it's in it was in the additional primary care. It sounds like
yeah, no,
we think we're good on that.
yeah, we want to find that money. We want to
Okay.
put that in.
Put that in. Okay, so that's it.
That's, if we're going to do anything to try to bend the curve on our medical costs, it's
Right.
investing in primary care.
Right, exactly. Okay.
Okay, so that's it.